Thanks for joining us today. Good afternoon. I'm David Palashuk, the author of Branding About the Commercialization of Cannabis, and your moderator for today's panel. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Evolution of an Industry, Tales and Trends from Cannabis Industry Veterans. Our veterans today are Adriana Hemans. Please join us, Adriana. There you are, behind door number 1. Adriana Hemans.
Hi.
Hello. Adriana is the Vice President of Demand at ISA. Adriana heads up the Cannabis Division at ISA, supporting many cannabis brands with their research and strategy, serving both large MSOs as well as small startups. Our next panelist is Austin Stevenson. Please join us, Austin. There you are, behind door number 2. Austin Stevenson is the Chief Innovation Officer at Vertosa. Austin is the CIO of one of the leading cannabis emulsion technology companies, and his work allows many of the brands that we know to serve up their delicious, consistently dosed and tasty beverages. I should say form factors, because it's way more than beverages.
Cheers.
Door number 3 is Lisa Buffo, the founder of the Cannabis Marketing Association. Hi, Lisa.
Hey.
She's been creating real-world and virtual events, bringing many of the industry's best marketers together, creating community, especially during the pandemic. So thank you all for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having us as well. It was awesome.
Right on. So I'm excited to chat. Let's just go through a few things that we're going to chat about, and we'll line it all up, and then we'll jump in. So a couple of things here to get your take on and share with us. One, how the cannabis industry has evolved over the last few years, because I think there's been a number of changes, certainly in light of the pandemic. We became essential. Lots of things have happened. The role of live events in the evolution of the cannabis industry. Again, Lisa, you've been on the forefront of that with virtual events, and now coming back with both Austin and Lisa presenting at MJ Biz. Just interesting to get our takes on that, your takes on that. A recap of both Austin and Lisa's presentation, which took place at MJ Biz, which for those that didn't make it, there'll be no mo FOMO for you, because we're all good, and we'll give you a little piece and taste of that. And then some hot topics and buzz coming out of what's now being called Weed Week in Las Vegas. And so just for those of you that aren't up to speed on that, this was the first year for MJ Unpacked taking place during the same time, pretty much the same week as MJ BizCon. So MJ BizCon in its 10th year is a show that pretty much has been everything to everybody, just a massive show to get through. We've even seen folks talk about their strategies for getting through the show, and the sneakers or the shoes they'd be wearing, and having all of the liquids they needed to make it through the show. And then there's the MJ Unpacked, which is a new show, smaller, and I think a result of MJ BizCon maybe being everything to everybody. So I'm curious to get your take on that as well. So with that, before we jump in, I'd also like to say to those listening, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of us, please feel free to put them in the chat. And as we sort of make it toward the back end of the hour, we'll jump to that, and we'll try to answer those questions. So just as a quick icebreaker for all of us, Adriana, in one word, how would you sum up Weed Week or MJ BizCon or your time in Las Vegas this year?
Well, I know you asked for one word, but I'm tempted to break the rules as usual and use 2 words, but it's a hyphenated, so technically it's okay. I want to say highly anticipated, because with a whole year, almost 2 years of no contact with our colleagues and our friends, that moment of knowing, oh, we can finally be together again and share and talk about these things that have happened over the past couple of years was so exciting. And just being able to reflect on all the changes that have happened, right? So you mentioned going from illegal to essential, so many new states coming online, acquisitions and mergers, new people coming in. Being able to finally share space was incredibly exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lisa, what are your thoughts, or what are your thoughts in one word?
I'm also going to go with the hyphenated word and say nonstop. So to build on what Adriana said, there were so many people to see and meet and catch up with. And a lot of folks who I call almost like my pandemic friends, where they were people I worked with really closely over the last 2 years and met specifically after the pandemic started and worked close with that. You know, we built this relationship. I really got to know them, but I never met them in person. So getting the opportunity to go to coffee or dinner with folks, as well as catching up with, you know, colleagues I had known and just hadn't seen in a while. The conversations were a lot longer. There was a lot more people to see, and the week just flew by because it was so stimulating and so many people to talk to and see that I definitely wasn't able to do it all. I don't think anybody can, but it was really high quality conversations and interactions, and that just made it so so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Austin, what's your hyphenated word?
Well, I guess my word, could be hyphenated, depending upon what dictionary you look at, but the word's reinvigorating. The week in itself was incredibly reinvigorating because of the human connection that was finally felt after 2 years in the pandemic. Reflecting on the event, we started this company at the end of 2018 and didn't really even fully commercialize our product offerings until 2019. So we have 1 full year of growth, and then boom, the pandemic hit. And I realized that we spent most of our business's life cycle in a pandemic, having to be in front of people without being in front of them. And in our business line, it's a lot of formulation work. It's very intimate. And we had to do most of it virtually. And so, with the rise of fast-acting products and cannabis beverages, a lot of that happened during the pandemic. And getting to MJ Biz and seeing people and friends and colleagues that you never have seen, in real life before, being surprised by how tall some people are or how short other people are, and just, be embraced and ultimately, appreciated and loved by the community was awesome. It's my 7th MJ Biz, and I thought it was the best one yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty amazing. Just a quick tangent here because you mentioned this, Austin. Not only has Vertosa been basically in business for just a few years, with the majority of that during the pandemic, Lisa, you've really created the Cannabis Marketing Association just before or a little bit before the pandemic, and have probably ridden out most of CMA's ride during the pandemic as well. Could you just quickly talk about that and what it's like to build a business, in a recognizable business in the industry in 2 years during a pandemic?
Yeah, so we actually sort of unofficially started in early 2016. So we started having meetings, building the community, learning, and doing research early 2016. But it took a few years for us to formalize it, understand what we were doing, where we wanted to go. And we officially launched similarly to Austin, sort of end of 18, beginning of 19. So our sort of official launch was on that timeline, but we had been laying that groundwork before. But we were very in-person based before, and then we had to pivot online. And like anything, it had its pros and cons. I think one of the pros was the ability to connect folks across the country that we had maybe taken for granted, where we thought, oh, we need to do events locally on the ground. Each market is so different, and we had been. But when you're forced to go fully online and move everything online, it opens up these doors to say, hey, we can have a meeting and have someone from Oakland and someone from Boston there, and they can connect and meet each other. And that's a really beautiful thing. And it also made it, I think, a little more also financially accessible for some folks. I mean, to go to events, if they're not in your hometown, you have to fly, get budget, all those things. It takes time. So the ability to do that lowered some barriers to entry. But as always, I think we all know that just nothing replaces in person. And after years of endless Zoom calls, I think that Zoom fatigue was very real and felt. And it has a bit of a shelf life. So the ability to get back in person at BizCon, and for us moving back in person, we're really excited about. But if it wasn't for the pandemic, that enthusiasm, I don't think would be there. And that almost forgiveness for people, and just the ability to be a little bit more flexible and open, just given how much our entire world has changed. It was just so nice to experience that and feel that shared joy again. So yeah, aspects of it that are very difficult, both related to the pandemic as well as just all of the changes in the industry too, but other aspects that were, definitely silver linings that wouldn't have come through otherwise.
Yeah, it's funny. I could think back a couple of years ago when I was burnt out from traveling to the events, and then all of a sudden we couldn't go to the events, and I was jonesing to be at the events. So I guess we always want what we can't have usually, but it's so. Lisa, just quickly, how will you balance, moving forward? You created these virtual events, but you're also known for your CMA is known for its in-person events. How will you balance that moving forward?
So we're definitely moving back to in-person. It will probably be more of a hybrid model and more targeted as far as what events we do, when, where, and how. The pandemic still isn't over. We're still going through it, and everyone has very different comfort levels, and just the entire event scene has changed. So we'll be moving forward in a hybrid format and just being very targeted about our time and resources, as well as our attendees too, and what we're asking of them as far as where to show up and what type of value we deliver. But we have incorporated webinars, and there's definitely still a space for that, and the ability to attend them live, watch them back at your convenience, and be able to not have to leave your desk or even your home to still get access to content. So I think a solid hybrid model is the path forward for, frankly, most event producers that I've spoken to.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. Interesting. Adriana, as VP at ISA, your job is to really provide business leaders with insights to drive growth. And in your eyes, how has the industry's needs changed over the last few years? And how do we see what's happening at MJ BizCon with the new event MJ Unpacked? Is there different needs sort of arising now, or is the industry needing new things as it matures? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been an evolution in the types of content that you see at events, specifically at MJ. So I should preface this by saying that my first MJ was 2018, and that was a year when there was still a lot of buzz and talk about the Wild Wild West. You still hear people say that, but I think less frequently than back then. And there was this sense of, it's the gold rush. You have to get in and stake your claim while there's still land available. Speed to market was a big thing. Logistics, legal issues. And we still have that type of content. I think that's still needed. But what we've seen this year is a much more sophisticated, nuanced understanding of what kind of the big boys do with their marketing and branding and their product development, right? There's a lot more conversation around who are your core customers? What does that look like? Whereas if you ask somebody 5 years ago, they might say, well, it's anybody who smokes weed, or it's everybody. And if you ask business leaders today, they'll say, it's women who are over 55 and prefer CBD topicals, or they have a very clear idea of who they're trying to reach and what their differentiation is in the market. And I think the content at MJ really reflects that. It's gotten very sophisticated. They're throwing around terms about sophisticated analytics and branding strategies from Lisa, and talking about what goes into the best formulations from Austin. So we've seen a lot of advancement. I think there's space for other smaller events too, but I think for right now, MJ is definitely the foundational one that brings everybody together.
Do you find just the massive size of it? I often find it's easy to get lost there. It's easy to sort of question your place in the industry. Like, okay, where am I as relating to, you're walking by the extraction machines, you're walking by the big ag machines. There's so many different um, things taking place, from agriculture all the way through to brand development and all the ingredients that go in along the way. Do you find that hard to get your head around as you're walking through the show?
I find it hard to get my feet around. I have to bring Band-Aids with me when I go around. I mean, really, the only limitation is how much energy you have in one day, but it's like a choose your own adventure situation. You can just decide where you want to go, what you want to explore, and it's all there for the taking, which is what makes it a fun event.
Yeah, which almost begs the question, should the event be longer so you can spend time in different sections? But
I don't know if I would survive if that was the case.
well, I was wearing sneakers, and most of the women were wearing high heels, so I totally respect that, because I would be crawling on my hands and knees through the show. Austin, just taking that train of thought for a moment, but sort of moving it over to the technology side. As a cannabis emulsion technology manufacturer, that in itself is its own vertical, if you will, within the industry. Could you talk about the technology, how it's changing, and how you and your company fit into the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I think starting with kind of over the last few years, I've been in a very privileged position to, work in California, Colorado, and in multiple markets as, investor, advisor, and operator. And I think, the work that Adriana and Lisa are doing specifically, speaks to how much more informed people are as business leaders on the consumers that they're, building products and designing products for. At Vertosa, we're also very privileged to, somewhat be the nexus of innovation when it comes to new product development. We started this company understanding that, flower and vape was cannabis 1.0, but that there is such a large, proliferation of new consumers that are curious about cannabis, call them canna curious, but they're looking for more familiar, more approachable, more better for you type of products, like beverages and confections and gummies, things that you don't have to inhale, or you don't have to combust, something to be able to, enjoy a cannabis experience. Because there's a lot of stigma behind that, right? There's cannabis stigmas, but there's also smoking stigmas. But we all know, and we believe that at Vertosa, and me personally, I love the plant. I love cannabis, and it has so much benefit. So we had to really figure out how to create that benefit in a more approachable form factor, and that's why we started with beverage. And so, in the show, you see great evolution and enhancements in technology. And for us, we really focused on being the best delivery mechanism for cannabinoids. We work with all different type of extracts. So we take cannabis oils like this, and then turn them into fast acting liquid emulsions like this, or even beyond emulsions, into dry powders, so that these fast acting ingredients can go into the beverages, the gummies, the confections, all those that are food based or ingestible based, and more familiar to consumers. And so when we started a few years ago, that wasn't the conversation. It was all around stability and consistent dosing, and that was the problem that we had to solve. Folks were trying to put high-end extracts or premium extracts, or just basic extracts, distillates and isolates into products, and they were failing potency tests. And so we had to roll up our sleeves, figure out testing methodologies, figure out formulation, and solve the problem of testing first. And then we had to solve the problem of accelerated onset, ultimately feeling the experience faster, because consumers hate to wait. They want to take something and feel it right away. They don't want to wait an hour or 2 hours to ultimately get that enhanced sensory experience. So we've seen over this last couple of years continued evolution of fast acting ingredients, and now we're in the position here at Bertosa to really quantify that. So the steps that folks are looking for as the bigger players come to market, traditional CPG enters the cannabis industry, folks like PBR and Vita Coco and Hi-Fi Hops from Lagunitas and all these folks, they're all looking for the quantifiable evidence that shows that fast acting is validated, that shows that bioavailability and all these trending words is accurate. So where we've spent a lot of time and energy this past year and continue to go into 2022 is doing things like pharmacokinetic studies, PK studies, where we're measuring the amount of cannabinoids in the blood with live human clinical trials, and then allowing that data to speak for itself. But then translating that data to the brands that we work with so that they can make claims and they can feel confident in putting fast acting on the package itself. And that's sort of the type of evolution that I've seen and will continue to see moving forward.
I love that. Thank you, Austin. It's interesting. No matter where, whether on Clubhouse or in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, the conversation usually always comes up amongst a group of people. Is cannabis and cannabinoids, is it an industry or is it an ingredient? And my response is it's both. And and I think the work you're doing, Austin, is impressive, but also needed as I'll say it this way: as you move away from the plant and you move from the flower through extracts, but then finally, as you just showed, let's say isolates or distillates or water-soluble powders, that becomes an ingredient. And so when those companies, like you pointed over your shoulder, Pabst Blue Ribbon and Lagunitas and others like Colgate-Palmolive come into the industry and use cannabinoids in their products, they will be ingredients. And it's the work that you're doing which will actually allow that to happen in a way that consumers better understand. So thank you for that. That's what we need to do. That's what quantifies what we're doing and adds some science to what we're doing. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's a pleasure and a privilege. And walking the show, you see the technology is in a place now where you start with a plant, but we have the capabilities to break that plant down into the individual components and then build it back up for a desired effect or state. Yes, more research is needed, and we're investing in that research. And likely, these supply chain partners, as well as the traditional CPG folks that you just called out, are all coming in and wanting to see that and wanting to support that research. So yes, it does feel like we're kind of like sugar salesmen at times, like we're providing the sugar for a bigger product, but also it comes with the responsibility of validating, quantifying, and really informing folks on how to use the product to design the product of the future.
Right. And I'll always say I start off with my love for the plant, but the work that you're doing allows cannabinoids to extend further than they've traditionally extended. And I think that's where the industry starts to build and get momentum and start to do things that it hasn't quite done yet. And even in that, that is also the community that Lisa's building too, I think is important. And as these real companies or outside companies come into the industry, I think that's important, and I think we'll build, and I think that's what we're doing. I think that's what Weed Week, if you will, is all about, and we're starting to see that. So so speaking of MJ BizCon and Weed Week, I'd like to ask Lisa just to, we spoke about the NOMO FOMO, and I know there were so many people that wanted to go, to Vegas that didn't make it. You actually presented at MJ BizCon. The title of your presentation was Amp Your Brand, Winning Strategies for Your Business. So as founder of the Cannabis Marketing Association, I'm curious to hear the highlights of your presentation. Would you mind sharing that with us and giving us a little insight?
Yes, thank you. So I always like to say when it comes to marketing strategy, it's going to be specific to your market, your company, your funding, your human resources. So there isn't really a one size fits all approach. So for this talk, given that it was a wide audience, I tried to give a framework for how to think about marketing that then the audience could take and apply to their own situation. But I first started with some studies and some data. And when I went into the presentation, I reached out to all of our members and I interviewed over 30 of them. And I asked them some of the largest brands, MSOs, retailers, marketing agencies, PR firms, and just said, you know, what's going on? What's working? What's not? What trends are we seeing? And I collected that data and put that together. And there was 2 studies that stuck out in particular. So the first one addresses brands directly, and it was a study done by Brightfield Group following 1,000 consumers in California. And they wanted to see how are consumers converting through the purchase funnel. The ultimate goal was to see, is there brand loyalty in cannabis? Do brands matter? And there was 2 data points that really stuck out. So we know the marketing funnel, right? You know, you got awareness, consideration, conversion, loyalty, advocacy. So they found that 70% of consumers were going from consideration to conversion. Furthermore, 85% were going from conversion to loyalty. So basically, those are huge numbers for brand loyalty. And my message to brands was to focus on that top of the funnel, that if you can get folks into the top of the funnel, that awareness and consideration stage, the chances are between 7 to 9 out of 10 folks are converting all the way through and or becoming loyal brand advocates. So focus on that top of funnel. And there's further research that shows if you look at the total addressable market of cannabis, we're still at the tip of the iceberg. In 2020, we did about 20 billion in US legal cannabis sales, representing about 45 million consumers. That is at absolute most, a third of the total addressable market of adults who may be interested in cannabis. So when I say focus on the top of the funnel, it's not just let me go get that consumer from my competitor and really work to get that consumer from my competitor. It's who haven't we talked to at all? Who has not stepped foot into a dispensary yet? Who might still be purchasing, not from dispensaries, and who may be interested in trying cannabis and maybe they haven't tried yet. So I was really encouraging marketers to see the bigger picture, see the forest from the trees, and go after those consumers who need a little more help, need a little more education, and a little more nudging. And we found similar information for retailers as well, that they are converting, they are loyal, but it is a little bit more harder for retailers to get that brand loyalty than it is for brands. And there's some data there too. I won't go into too much of the weeds with it, but it was similar information, but retailers are going to have to work harder than brands as far as that bottom of the funnel loyalty. And you can get that through referral programs, strategic discounts, but you need to be careful about those and very targeted in those. There can be a tendency in this industry, and I've seen it at retailers, to sort of blanket discount the store, or really not do the math on how discounts impact their bottom line, or they're doing discounts and promotions that aren't targeted to consumers appropriately. For example, sending concentrate promotions to a heavily flower-based consumer. So I emphasize the need for getting good data and really using good data to inform those promotions. And then the last part I really talked about was I sort of turned the talk on its head and said the marketing funnel's dead. And I did some research based on reports that HubSpot put out. They're sort of seen as thought leaders in marketing as a whole, cannabis aside. And they have since changed their own model away from inbound marketing to the flywheel framework. And you can actually look this up on HubSpot's website. But basically, the flywheel just takes the marketing funnel and sort of turns it in on itself. So when you get a customer all the way through the funnel and they're loyal and they become advocates, the funnel falls short in that it stops there. It's like, okay, we're done, right? That's it. We got them down all the way through, we're done. You can't do that. You've got to not forget about that customer who's now doing work for you. They're now going out and telling strangers about your product and the experience they had. So I was encouraging folks to look at the flywheel model and say, once you've got folks into that brand loyalty perspective, that's the time to double down on your storytelling, on your customer experience, on really delivering that value so they can go out and recruit new folks for your business, to not just forget about them because you're so focused on the top of the funnel, but to really nurture that relationship and focus on that amazing brand experience and that amazing customer service, which happens at every touch point throughout the funnel, to keep them there and to work smarter and not harder. Frankly, that's the name of the game, right? Like, after this pandemic, I'm trying to have fun, get back to living my life. So we got to work smarter, not harder. And that's not forgetting about your customers once they've come through and really shown their loyalty, because the numbers are speaking to it, but our customer service and marketing programs aren't fully catching up to it. So I kind of brought all of that together where I presented the data specific to brands and retailers, and then really emphasize this flywheel framework and saying the funnel's a good start, but it falls short in that sense. Make it more of a virtuous cycle, and encourage business leaders to think about sales, marketing, and customer experience as more unified than separate, and how can they improve that customer experience and product experience at every touch point so you get that brand loyalty and it sticks.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. And it's funny too, as you were talking about the flywheel, I'm sitting here looking at my screen, and Adriana is all about the research and working through that, and you're all about the customer. And then finally, once you realize what it's all about, Austin is really about the form factor that fits the customer's needs, their rituals, their need states, all the things that sort of make a product meaningful. Because the truth is, if you don't,
We have the trifecta right here.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the truth is, if you don't have the customer information, what they're about, what their lifestyle is, whether they're consuming discrete or non-discrete products, if you don't have the their understanding of when they consume, what their rituals are, and really creating the form factors that are informed by those rituals, like the soccer mom, sorry for the stereotype, who who can't smoke in front of her kids or in her house, but can use a topical or a lotion. So there is a flywheel effect, and I see it right here. So I'm actually going to check that out, Lisa. Thank you for that. Austin,
Yes.
would you mind jumping in and sharing a bit about your presentation, which was called the CPG Effect: Developing Cannabis Products of the Future?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So, I had a great panel of, experienced CPG and cannabis veterans and formulators, throughout the U.S. We had folks from Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and even some folks up in Canada on the panel. And, what we really focused on is what that next generation product looks like. And in my panel, really what I highlighted was two words that we talk about at Vertosa all the time, which is design experience. It's our responsibility, because of the technology that is here today, is to help design that next generation of cannabis products. As mentioned a little bit earlier, we have the technologies now to take the plant and break it down into its individual components, and then build it back up with very specific intention to create an experience that is meaningful to the consumer. But something that I talk about all the time is that cannabis is the great equalizer. Everyone loves cannabis. And so, the consumer type is as diverse as this panel and, all the attendees that are here with us. So, what works for the low dose soccer mom that you're talking about may not, work or be the desired product for the heavy consumer that loves premium extracts and live resin. It's very, very different. So we have a responsibility at Vertosa to help address all of the consumers' needs, or really all of the brands that we work with. And so the way that we do it, and what I talked about, is kind of designing cannabis experience with three layers: cannabinoids, terpenes, and functional ingredients. And it's the combination of those three different layers that ultimately create this stacking effect. And so, you have folks that, they're looking for cannabis to be a sleep remedy. And they're asking, well, how do I get there? I may be a new cannabis consumer. I talked to somebody and I heard that, this indica is supposed to, put me in the couch, right? But why and how? And that's where we really roll up our sleeves and start to understand the plant better and understand the compounds that are going to help design better sleep. So, we've done a lot of research with academic universities, our scientific advisory board on evaluating the first layer, different cannabinoids that help design and promote, a sedative effect, a sleepiness or restful effect. That would be cannabinoids like CBD and CBN specifically. And then we talked about, terpenes as well. And there's a lot of, evidence, already peer-reviewed evidence that you can go out and research on academic, websites like PubMed that highlight terpenes like linalool that's derived from lavender and its help in promotion of better sleep. So now you take CBD, CBN, incorporate linalool, a terpene that's already proven to help promote rest, relaxation, and sleep, and then stack that together. And now you start to go towards designing a product for sleep. And then you can include one last element, which is a functional ingredient. And functional ingredients are helpful in the cannabis industry because it provides a pathway to make existing research and a pathway to use existing research rather to make label claims. There's a lot of products out there where marketers, and Lisa I know and Adriana talks to these folks all the time, where they're like, what can I put on the package? Can I say X, Y, and Z? And so what folks are doing, specifically in traditional CPG, and what they're very familiar with, is that if you're going to make that label claim, is it a marketing claim? Is it a functional claim? Like, what type of claim is it? And if it's a functional claim, it darn well better be supported by evidence. And so there's this opportunity that then exists to include functional ingredients in the 3 layers of stacking to help make those label claims and also help design that cannabis product of the future. So again, going back to sleep, an example would be cannabinoids, CBD, CBN, terpenes, linalool, functional additives, magnesium, things that are already proven to help promote better sleep. Stack them together, and now you've designed a product that is going to help accelerate the time to bed that someone gets. And that's where we spent a lot of time on the panel, and there's so much more. For us, we're very focused on creating a full day experience because I do believe that cannabis is an ingredient. The technology in itself is positioned now to be able to build and design better experiences. And so you can have an uplifting, energetic, morning time ritual, David, that you're talking about with cannabis. You can have an afternoon ritual to help you focus and keep you energized throughout the back half of the day with cannabis. And then you can incorporate cannabis in your nighttime ritual as well to help you get to bed and have better sleep. Yes, there's a ton of more research that is required, but luckily, as more states become recreational and more CPG companies, the P&Gs of the world, the Colgate Palmolives of the world come in, they're looking for that research, they're driving that research, and they're helping all of us kind of elevate to incorporate those 3 layers, cannabinoids, terpenes, and functionals into this next generation of cannabis products.
That's really interesting. I love the stacking effect. It reminds me, I have a dear friend. We had a conversation not too long ago, and one of the things he had said was the entourage effect doesn't stop at cannabinoids. It continues. So if you create a product, as you're talking about, with a stacking effect, that there are real other products that can be used in conjunction with cannabis and cannabinoids, then you get to another level. And I think clearly too, as you talk about terpenes, it's very clear what aromatherapy is all about. And if you really break down the plant and look at the terpenes, you can get to the linalools and you can get to the the limonene, and you can get to the myrcenes, and we understand those effects in the terpene world. So why wouldn't it be similar in the cannabis world as well? I hope we get to a place where people can start to describe and talk about cannabinoids in that way, which is more familiar to other people. I think that will help.
Absolutely, David. I think we're getting there. With the work that Adriana is doing, specifically at helping to inform brand managers and product developers, the work that Lisa is doing to help promote and educate consumers, that's where we are. I feel that the consumer today, they have the world at their fingertips. They can go on Google and research a bunch of stuff, but when it comes to cannabis, there's a lot of misinformation. So this whole pandemic has really, a lot has been uncovered, and I feel that kind of the trends moving forward is that we're getting better at educating folks. We're getting better at informing people which cannabinoids, which extracts, which terpenes, which functionals are intended for which use cases. And now this adoption of cannabis in your daily ritual and being supported and embraced by traditional CPG is fueling a lot more research. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. We know that in the beverage market, cold brew coffee has been a big hit. And I'm spending my days, researching the effects of caffeine and cannabinoids. There's some really interesting studies around delta-9 THC and CBD and its synergistic effect with caffeine, and then as well as the how your body responds to caffeine, cannabinoids, and also how individuals titrate differently. So there's a lot more research to be done. We're only have hit the tip of the iceberg, but as more traditional CPG comes into effect, more research dollars comes with it, and with that research, more information and guidance on how to use cannabinoids, terpenes, and functionals together, so that we do have full plant medicine, plant-based products, and that's all we want nowadays. Like, the consumer wants products that are good for them, but also that they know what the effects are going to be when they consume them.
Right. So let's talk about research for a moment. Adriana, I know that some of the research that came out of ISA was really intriguing to me, and even this one pivot, if you will, between additive and subtractive, in a consumer's mind state. Would you mind chatting a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm really excited to hear Lisa talk about the point of good data in and good data out, and how much that really informs marketing strategies. And what we do, coming from the perspective of a research firm that's focused on consumers and the consumer experience, is we gave the example of the soccer mom earlier who needs to be discreet, right? There's, a universe of different usage occasions and different needs and different emotional states that consumers are looking for. And we've sort of tried to help brands, and both brands that are inside cannabis and brands that are outside cannabis, trying to understand when is a good time to get in and what do those consumers look like, is what are the activities around it? Are they looking for something that will take away pain, take away anxiety, or are they looking for something that will enhance an everyday experience? And that would be the additive component, right? They're like, well, it's so much easier to get my chores done if I have a little bit of help from my favorite edible. So that was really helpful for us when we started looking at what are the sort of like key personas, or what are the key like behaviors that we can use to put them into a framework that helps marketers understand the best way to communicate directly to those people and communicate that they are able to fit into their lives at the right place at the right time, and build trust. Sometimes through education, explaining what the benefits are, and sometimes just by the right positioning or the right marketing messages. So that was definitely a key unlock for us.
Yeah, that's, I mean, to me, I've been in marketing and branding all my life, and that was just a new spectrum, if you will. I never thought of additive versus subtractive. I mean, the truth is, it truly is a mindset and a mind state of a consumer. Think of somebody that's taking Advil. They're not taking Advil to really enhance or focus or create a better experience. What they're doing is trying to alleviate the pain, which is
Mhm.
to remove the pain. So if you already have a certain mindset, consumer mindset, as you go into it, I use this product for this and I use this product for that, then
Mhm.
that really informs where the product is sold, how it's sold, who it's sold to, um, and those can be critical moments. If someone has a headache and uses it for that, then they need it right then. So knowing that
Exactly.
the state, the ritual, and what it's all about is huge. And
Mhm.
we walk cannabis companies through that and help them better understand that with the research. That too drives a better product or informs the development of a better product. And I think that's really where we need to head. I know we have a couple of minutes left. I'm curious to know, actually, before we jump to any questions, are there any thoughts, Austin, Lisa, Adriana, that you'd like to share before we jump into any questions from the audience?
Well, I do want to share that we don't have any questions from the audience because we did such a good job of explaining everything.
Yeah.
I'm sure questions will arise, but I do have a thought to David, your last point, because you mentioned Advil, and we talk about the CPG effect and kind of what the trends are moving forward. Well, I think now that the technology is here and developing these next gen cannabis products, you're starting to see true product line differentiation, and you're seeing that on the packaging itself. So similar to when you go to the over-the-counter, Walgreens, you have your general Advil, and then you have like your dual action or fast-acting, version of Advil, right? So, and one's at a premium. Well, you're seeing that a lot now with cannabis products. We have and work with some gummy brands that are out there, like Plus, and they have their own, standard gummy, but now they've just released for sleep a dual action and fast acting type of gummy. And you see it written on the package itself. And this product is being released at a slight premium as a different use case and effect, because it's to help get you to sleep faster, so you don't have to wait. And it's really that product differentiation, or typically what traditional retail would call, it's like differentiation on the price ladder, that is starting to emerge because of the technology today. And so, there's these consumers now, especially millennial consumers and Gen Z, they're really looking for premiums. There's something about premium and that is important to them. And they're looking for, products that are going to be incredibly effective as well, and have that data behind it. And that's where I see right now, for the first time, like that being embraced by the cannabis industry. You're looking at, I'll tell you an example. It's like another gummy is like Stizzy. You see here written that they're speaking to the fast acting part, but they're also using a premium live resin to speak to the cannabis consumer today. That says, oh, live resin means premium. That means the creme de la creme of extract, but also the functionality of fast acting is there. So now you have your standard gummies, but now you have your premium gummies that are incorporated with high-end extracts and have a faster acting purpose. And that gets really, really exciting, because then you're just giving consumers more options, and then you're also, by way of packaging and labeling, informing them of the differences between the product and how to use it and why to use it. So that's where I get super excited, and your comment about Advil just triggered that, because it's something that's very familiar to folks every single day.
It is, and yet we as an industry are struggle through it and stumble through it quite often. I think there's lots to be learned. There's lots of knowledge within the industry, but there's lots of knowledge from outside the industry that needs to really be translated into the industry and applied to the industry in ways that make sense. Yeah, it's really intriguing just how it all starts to come together. I'm curious too. Austin, you mentioned earlier about well, we spoke earlier about form factors. How do you find varying form factors as you move your cannabinoids through liquid state, powder state, extract, oil state? How do you feel that ties back into to form factors and what is being asked for right now? Is there a pull toward beverages or a pull toward other form factors that you see potentially normalizing the industry or bringing it to the masses?
Absolutely. I think David, you nailed the word on the head. It's like normalization and bringing it to the masses. Earlier we spoke about stigma, and we're overcoming a lot of stigma in the cannabis industry as a whole. Historical, criminalization of cannabis, and then also just the stigmas behind, smoking and inhaling, vape. The fact that people are very, very cannabis curious. They want to try it, but they ask, well, I don't want to smoke, right? I have my 80-year-old, older than that now, 80-something-year-old grandmother who says, I want to try cannabis, but I don't want to smoke. She never smoked. I'm not going to smoke anything. And so beverage becomes, that familiar form factor that people are wanting. And you really saw this development over the pandemic because of a lot of concerns around respiratory health. And so cannabis beverage has really risen through the pandemic because canna-curious folks have wanted to try cannabis, but wanted a more approachable form factor. And so one of the books on my shelf that we hold near and dear to our company is called The History of the World in 6 Glasses. This book really speaks to the evolution that beverage, has on society from the beginning. People congregated around the watering hole, and then a lot of political discourse happened, and political manifestos were developed at coffee shops when coffee was first introduced. And it talks about how spirits and bars and lounges and beer and alcohol and mead ultimately became a really congregating place for communities to interact. And so now with the technology that is here, we can create cannabis beverages. That can be the 7th glass, if you will, for beverages of the future. And brands and companies like Cann, as an example, has done an excellent job at informing and educating folks on how to make cannabis beverage sessionable. And it's that sessionable kind of social element that, now that hopefully the pandemic may be in our rearview window, that people are looking for. How do I take cannabis and make it enjoyable to the masses? How do I make it normalized like a bar or lounge setting? And so I get super excited because beverage does just that. And the evolution of licensing in recreational states to incorporate consumption lounges and to kind of create consumption lounges where there's some that allow for smoking, some that allow for vaping, some that allow for no smoking but just beverage. Then it starts to look and feel more like an alcoholic bar or a speakeasy or lounge. So I get super excited for these new states like New York that are coming online and adopting some of these new regs to create consumption lounges that look and feel more like the hospitality industry, and where there could be a day, right, where you have a cannabis beverage on tap, that you're right next to an alcoholic beverage, and that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, but one day in the future it could be the case where consumers can choose between alcohol and cannabis in a form factor that is widely associated and understood by the masses, and that's beverage.
So I agreed. So let's take that for a moment and run with it, right? So it really, normalization comes down to trust. And so as we start to trust things like, the beverages we drink and the other things we consume, we need to start talking about how to educate and inform, because that's the beginning of trust. So Lisa, would you just touch upon that a little bit in terms of, you know, cannabis consumers and then the curious and how we talk differently to the different groups a little bit, and how we slowly pull them in. I always liken it to it's trying to convince somebody to come into the pool with you, and first you have to say, look, the water's not so cold, and then you have to say, but we're in the shallow end, right? And it's just a certain way of educating people and pulling them closer to you to come into the pool with them. And I think there's many different groups that we have to speak differently to. Could you talk about that as you know,
Yes.
as a marketing person?
And thank you for asking, because I love this question. I always say that good marketing is good storytelling. So the first step is really telling your story, and that's how we build trust, both at the personal level and the company level, right? So like if your mom or grandma, they're not going to necessarily hear from a brand and it will change their mind. They got to hear from you first about your story, your experience with cannabis. Have a safe space for them to ask questions and bust those myths. For many, there's a really high barrier because we are fighting 80 years of propaganda, stigma, and lies. That's, you know, very different than just, it's not that cold. It's this is not going to hurt you. This is not going to, you know, there's sort of the personal implications and the societal implications of the stigma that we're fighting. So I always say step one is tell your story. It happens on a personal level, friends, family, colleagues, but it happens at the industry and the company level too. And I think one thing companies often overlook is the story of their founding. Like I know so many companies where at industry events, they're telling me our founders had this experience or it helped them treat some awful disease and it created a passion, and then they did all this research and now they got into it and they've started these amazing companies, but their marketing materials are all focused on the product and its benefits. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but I know I always connect with that story of who's building this company, why, and why does it matter to them? It's finding that sort of emotional middle ground that makes a human connection and builds trust outside of just the technical speak, which is great, but the technical speak isn't going to help someone who they spent their whole high school, college, and post-grad education being told, you know, this is going to make you do awful things. You got to go more than that. And you have to understand that ultimately at the end of the day, there is this human aspect and we've got to connect there, and good storytelling is it. So it's understanding your story and conveying that in a way that is really going to connect and build trust. And then from there, you can get more technical, but start at the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think trust is everything. Just on a final note too, I remember a story told by Mark Feichel from PBR about the first time he consumed cannabis with his mother, which was a beverage, and it was a PBR, but it was a beverage and a PBR because she trusted those things. So, you know, I hope in the future, you know, some of the mainstream brands that are trusted and have worked worked for hundreds of years or decades to build that trust. I hope those companies too will come into the industry and do what they need to do to foster the normalization. I know we're just coming to the end of our time. I'd just like to check in again. Do we have any questions from anybody before we jump?
Well, if you do, we'll be sending out a follow-up with a video, and we'll send some links so you can get in touch with everybody. So if today wasn't the question day, then feel free to get in touch later with any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So that said, just a quick thank you to everyone who's listened and joined in. Adriana Heem, again, thank you so much. She is the VP and heading up the cannabis division at ISA. Austin Stevenson is the CIO at Vertosa. Thank you, Austin. And Lisa Buffo is the founder of the Cannabis Marketing Association. Again, our contact information is on the screen right now if you want to reach out to us. A couple of last things. We'll be sending out follow-up links to those that couldn't make it today that registered. So for those of you who are not here, I'm sharing that message with you. And for those that are here and are looking for more information or to see the recording again, when it is a recording, we're happy to share that with you, and that will be coming out soon. Thank you again so much for joining us. Adriana, thank you. Austin, thank you. Lisa, thank you. And to everybody who spent the day with us, a portion of your day, thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Thank you.